We've been talking about media coverage of Egypt for days now, and joining us to continue that discussion is Alyona Minkovski, host of The Alyona Show on RT. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, David.
So how much of your shows recently have been, what percentage devoted to Egypt, first of all, roughly?
I'm not quite sure about a percentage, but let's just say that we've been focusing almost half of our 1 hour show that we do 5 days a week to covering Egypt, or, at least 2/3 of it we've been trying to do. Obviously I can't do a full hour on Egypt every single day because we just don't have the resources. We don't have the people on the ground to be covering it 24 hours a day on our channel. But, we try to talk about it as much as we can.
This is interesting because we talk a lot about media critique and how the media works on our show. And one of the things I've been talking about for years now is a lot of the news we get in the U.S. is a matter of convenience. In other words, most networks have someone at the Pentagon, they have someone at the White House, so it's very easy to bring us news from those places. And as you mentioned, Egypt is not the only story right now. There is Tunisia, there's a number of other stories. So how much of the Egypt coverage do you think is convenience? CNN sending Anderson Cooper there, he got beat up. We saw a number of networks sending people there. How much of that is a factor here? How much of it being a real story is a factor? And how much of it can continue? In other words, remember the Chilean miners and also the Haiti earthquake. The story didn't all of a sudden go away overnight, but it did disappear from a lot of networks because people just got saturated with it.
Well, it's definitely a matter of convenience in terms of ideology. Also, if you look at some of the cable networks out there, Fox News, of course, being the best, or I guess the worst example. One thing that CNN does is CNN is always good at sending in Anderson Cooper, be he in a tight black T-shirt or whatever else is appropriate for the area that he's in, to be, in the dirt, in the middle of all the action. I think MSNBC actually here has been doing a very good job, too, of doing a lot of on-the-ground coverage. It is a volatile situation right there for journalists right now. Fox News has somehow just completely ignored the story. Yesterday they essentially played an hour-long infomercial for Rupert Murdoch's new The Daily, his new news venture that's going to show up on the iPad. And, they don't really cover anything from on the ground. They just have their people that are in studio that are just spinning the story the way they want to. And so I think that that's more a matter of convenience. It's something that Fox News just knows how to do so well, is just scaring the crap out of everybody all day long, every single day, 24/7. And whatever story is out there, they'll find a way to make it about us versus them, about the world is ending, and, America has to stand up to Islamists. They'll just pile in the Muslim Brotherhood with all of Al-Qaeda and say that it's a global jihadist war, and that's what we've been seeing.
That's interesting. You know why? That's interesting because I've been thinking about the Fox News coverage, and we can get more into that. And I was thinking that they didn't send people into Cairo because they don't care about the story. But you bring up a better point, which is they don't need people there for the narrative they're choosing. It's just not necessary to have people there.
Well, you're right. And, you can also look at some of the ratings, which is CNN. They have been devoting all their resources. They have people there. And they, for the first time, recently actually beat out MSNBC when it comes to their ratings. They've risen. But at the end of the day, Fox News is still #1. And I find that personally, a little troubling, because if you look at it, I think that Al Jazeera has far and away really owned this story. And everybody has been turning their eyes to them. And I think that it's great that you have a news outlet like that, in that region there. But at the same time, Al Jazeera is doing their job. Fox News is just attacking Al Jazeera. They don't need to. Bill O'Reilly just starts pointing fingers and saying that, well, Al Jazeera is anti-American and anti-Semitic, and that's why anyone on the left likes to watch Al Jazeera. And so they just completely whitewash the entire thing, and it works for them. And I find that scary and frustrating, because Al Jazeera, we watch it here in Washington, D.C. because everyone has access to it, but the majority of Americans don't. And so what the majority of Americans see is what they choose to see. And it's either Fox News, or it could be CNN or MSNBC, who I think are doing, like I said, a good job on the ground, but perhaps almost a little too optimistic in not necessarily, providing a little bit of critique, asking some difficult questions into, how this might fit into U.S. foreign policy, how this might really turn out. There are a lot of different options here as to what it might look like at the end.
That's right. And without getting into, I think that there are criticisms to be made of Al Jazeera. I think the uncontested anti-Semitic claims exist on Al Jazeera. Does that mean that we should not be paying attention to the reporting that they're doing? Certainly not. Last night at 10:40, just after 10:45 p.m. Eastern, I just flipped through Fox, MSNBC, CNN, headline news. CNN headline news always is running some kind of, TMZ type story. But that aside, while there was original reporting going on from Egypt on MSNBC and CNN, Fox News was running a recycled story about the healthcare repeal did not pass the Senate, a story that we knew was just a creation for political posturing from Republicans. Barack Obama indicated he's going to veto it even if it did get to his desk. It's an incredibly stark contrast, just flipping on, within 3 minutes what's on each of these networks. Does this go further than just the Muslim Brotherhood scare tactic rant in terms of why each network is covering it the way it does?
Oh, absolutely. I think that every single news channel, even CNN, if they try to call themselves the most objective of the three cable networks, I think that everybody has some kind of an agenda to push here. In terms of the MSNBCs, like I said, I think that perhaps they're being a little too optimistic, and it's rah-rah democracy in the Middle East, and let's support the people, without possibly asking as to who might actually fill that void if Hosni Mubarak does get taken out.
Last question. How long do you think this will be front page, headline, 24-hour news if the situation stays roughly the way it is now? I mean, another week, another 2 weeks? How long?
That's a little hard to say because our media definitely doesn't have the longest attention span, and neither do American viewers, which is, why Al Jazeera might be covering this nonstop and not taking their eyes off the story. You still see everyone else diverting to. MSNBC had a story about a runaway wild turkey that was attacking a mail truck today.
That's big news, though.
Yeah, I really. It was entertaining. I'm not going to lie. I had a good laugh at the video. But I think it definitely depends on the situation on the ground. If it stays violent, if it stays volatile. And I think that when it comes to some of the networks, they'll keep people there. I think Fox News is already done with it.
All right. Alyona Minkovski, host of The Alyona Show on RT. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, David.
All right. Have a good show tonight.
For having me on.